Why does the gospel teach us to love our enemies? Is it really possible to love those who harm us, and why should we do so? These are tough questions and ones that many of us grapple with, especially when faced with hurt, betrayal, or injustice. The idea of loving someone who has wronged us seems almost impossible. Yet this teaching is one of the core principles of Christianity, and it's something that Jesus himself lived out even when faced with unimaginable suffering. Love is central to the Christian faith. The command to love is repeated throughout the Bible, and it is through love that Christians are called to live in relationship with God and with one another. Jesus emphasizes this love most clearly when he tells us that the greatest commandments are to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and to love our neighbours as ourselves, Matthew 22:37-39. But in addition to loving those who are kind to us, Jesus also challenges us to love our enemies, those who may hate us or do us harm. This teaching is not just a suggestion, it is a command from Jesus. It is part of what it means to truly follow him. In Matthew 5:44, Jesus says, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." This isn't a request or an ideal to strive for. It's a directive that is meant to transform us from the inside out. Loving our enemies is a profound act of faith, one that calls us to rise above hatred, resentment, and revenge, and instead choose peace, forgiveness, and compassion. Why does Jesus call us to love our enemies? The answer lies in his own example. Jesus didn't just preach love, he lived it. He loved those who rejected him, betrayed him, and ultimately crucified him. In his final moments on the cross, he prayed for the very people who were putting him to death, saying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23:34. This was not an easy act, nor was it a sign of weakness. It was the ultimate display of strength, the strength to forgive, to heal, and to break the cycle of hatred and violence. Loving our enemies is a challenge that tests our faith. It goes against our natural instincts. When someone wrongs us, we often want to retaliate, to get even, or to hold on to our anger. However, Jesus teaches us that holding on to anger and hatred only hurts ourselves. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of negativity that steals our peace and joy. By choosing to love, we free ourselves from that burden and embrace the freedom that comes with forgiveness. Loving our enemies doesn't mean we condone their actions. It means we choose to let go of the hatred and seek peace just as Jesus did. This teaching of loving our enemies is not easy, but it's also not an impossible task. It requires us to step out of our comfort zones, to let go of bitterness, and to extend the same grace and forgiveness that we ourselves have received from God. It requires humility and a deep trust in God's plan for our lives. When we love our enemies, we reflect the love of God in a powerful way, showing the world a love that is unconditional, transformative, and healing. As we explore this topic further, I invite you to reflect on the ways that loving your enemies can change your life. How can we put this teaching into practice in our daily lives? How can we rise above hatred and choose to love even in the most challenging circumstances? If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to continue receiving inspiring content. Together, let's learn to follow Jesus' example and live lives that are filled with love, peace, and forgiveness. Thank you for watching. The teaching to love our enemies is one of the most challenging and transformative principles in the gospel. In a world where division, hatred, and retaliation often seem to dominate, the idea of loving those who harm us or oppose us can feel impossible. Yet this commandment lies at the heart of Jesus' message, and it is an essential part of Christian life. In this section, we will explore why loving our enemies is so important in the gospel, and how this teaching shapes our understanding of what it means to follow Christ. The Gospel offers multiple references to the idea of loving our enemies, but none are clearer than in Matthew 5:44. Jesus himself states, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." This statement is part of his famous Sermon on the Mount, where he outlines the attitudes and behaviors that define the kingdom of God. Jesus' words in this passage are not optional. they're a direct command. To love our enemies is to adopt a mindset that goes against the grain of human nature. Our natural inclination when someone wrongs us is often to respond with anger, resentment, or even revenge. However, Jesus calls his followers to a higher standard. He doesn't just tell us to tolerate our enemies or forgive them grudgingly, he commands us to love them. The command to love our enemies can be difficult to understand and even harder to practice, but when we dive deeper into the meaning behind these words, we can better grasp the significance of loving those who oppose us. Let's break down this teaching into smaller parts to understand why it is so critical. The question of why we should love our enemies is at the heart of this teaching. Why is it so important? Why, when we are hurt or wronged, are we commanded to respond with love rather than anger or retaliation? To answer this question, we need to understand a few fundamental aspects of the Christian faith. Breaking the cycle of hatred. One of the most compelling reasons why loving our enemies is important is because it breaks the cycle of hatred, vengeance, and retaliation. The cycle of violence and hate is something we see all around us, whether in personal conflicts or global disputes. When someone hurts us, our natural response might be to hurt them back, thinking that justice will be served or that we will somehow feel better. But the reality is that responding to hatred with more hatred only perpetuates the cycle. Hatred breeds more hatred and violence breeds more violence. In Matthew 5:39, Jesus gives another teaching that speaks to this concept. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. This passage challenges us to go beyond our instinct for self-preservation and retaliation. Jesus understood that responding with vengeance only fuels the problem, making it worse for everyone involved. When we love our enemies, we refuse to play a part in the cycle of hate and violence. Instead, we choose to rise above it, to break free from the negativity and seek peace. In practical terms, loving our enemies means choosing forgiveness over retaliation. It means opting to seek understanding rather than nurturing bitterness. Jesus knew that the only way to heal a broken world was to demonstrate love and forgiveness, not more violence. If everyone responded to conflict with love, the world would be a place of healing and peace rather than anger and division. Jesus as our model. The most profound example of loving one's enemies comes directly from Jesus' own life. Jesus didn't just teach us to love our enemies, he demonstrated it even in the face of the most extreme cruelty. He loved those who rejected, persecuted, and ultimately crucified him. In Luke 23:34, Jesus prays for those who are crucifying him. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. In that moment, when he was suffering the worst possible injustice, Jesus extended forgiveness to his enemies. He didn't lash out in anger, call for vengeance, or seek retribution. Instead, he prayed for their forgiveness. This is the perfect embodiment of love. Not love that is conditioned on how others treat us, but unconditional love that seeks the good of others, even when they cause harm. Jesus' act of loving his enemies is the ultimate model for Christians. We are called to follow in his footsteps and imitate his example. Loving our enemies isn't about condoning their behavior, it's about recognizing their humanity and choosing compassion over hatred. Jesus saw his persecutors as lost and in need of redemption, not as people to be despised. He knew that the greatest act of love was not to fight back, but to forgive and pray for those who hurt him. In Matthew 26:50, when Judas, one of his disciples, betrays him with a kiss, Jesus says, "Friend, do what you came for." Even in the face of betrayal, Jesus still addressed Judas with love and respect, showing that love transcends betrayal and wrongdoing. If Jesus in his final moments could choose love over hate, surely we, as his followers, can strive to do the same in our everyday interactions. Love is strength, not weakness. It's important to understand that loving our enemies does not mean we are weak or passive. On the contrary, love is strength. It takes great courage and inner strength to forgive those who have hurt us and to choose peace over conflict. This teaching is often misunderstood as promoting passivity, but in reality it is about strength through self-control and maturity. When we love our enemies, we are not saying that their actions are acceptable or that they shouldn't be held accountable for their wrongdoing. Instead, we are choosing to rise above our negative emotions, refusing to be controlled by anger or resentment. We acknowledge the hurt, but we don't let it define us or dictate our actions. Loving our enemies requires emotional resilience. It's easy to love those who treat us well, but it takes strength to love those who persecute us. Jesus' call to love our enemies is a call to mature love, the kind of love that sees beyond immediate pain and chooses forgiveness and healing. Loving our enemies shows the power of self-discipline and emotional intelligence. It is ultimately an act of strength because it requires us to overcome our instincts and act with grace even in the face of adversity. As we reflect on the teaching of loving our enemies, consider this question. Can you think of a situation in your life where loving your enemy could bring peace instead of seeking revenge? Think about a time when you were wronged, hurt, or betrayed. How might responding with love, understanding, and forgiveness have changed the situation? Perhaps there is someone in your life right now whom you are holding a grudge against, or perhaps there's a lingering conflict that could be resolved by choosing love over retaliation. Loving our enemies is not always easy, but it is incredibly powerful. It's a choice that can break the cycle of hatred, heal broken relationships, and lead to a deeper peace within ourselves. In this section, we have explored why the gospel teaches us to love our enemies, and we've seen that it's not just a nice idea, but a command that shapes how we are called to live as Christians. Loving our enemies is an essential part of following Jesus. It helps break the cycle of hatred, serves as a model of Christ's own life, and is an act of strength rather than weakness. As we strive to live out this teaching, we begin to understand that love has the power to transform hearts, bring peace, and reconcile divisions. The next time you face a difficult situation with someone who has wronged you, remember Jesus' words, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." It's not easy, but it's the path to true peace both within ourselves and in the world around us. Loving our enemies may seem like an impossible task, especially in moments of conflict or when we feel wronged. However, the gospel encourages us to embrace this teaching not only as a command, but as a pathway to spiritual growth and personal transformation. When we choose to love our enemies, we are not only fulfilling a biblical command, but also reaping numerous practical benefits that improve our well-being, both spiritually and socially. In this section, we will explore the real-world benefits of loving our enemies and how this transformative act can lead to greater inner peace, stronger relationships, and even better health. One of the greatest benefits of loving our enemies is the inner peace it brings. Holding on to anger, resentment, or hatred towards someone who has hurt us can be incredibly exhausting. These negative emotions weigh on our hearts and minds, creating a constant inner turmoil. When we allow bitterness and revenge to fester, we are essentially allowing those negative feelings to control us, which erodes our peace of mind. Loving our enemies helps us free ourselves from these burdens. It's not about pretending that what the person did wasn't wrong or dismissing the hurt we've experienced. Instead, it's about releasing the power that anger and resentment have over us. When we choose to forgive, we free ourselves from the prison of bitterness. By making the conscious decision to love rather than hate, we take back control over our emotions, finding peace in the process. This doesn't mean that it's easy or immediate. Loving someone who has wronged us often requires time, patience, and a willingness to heal. But over time, choosing to love through prayer, forgiveness, and understanding helps us experience a deeper sense of peace that comes from letting go of negative emotions. Instead of dwelling on past wrongs, we focus on the present moment and on creating a future where love and reconciliation are possible. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus offers an invitation to those burdened by life's struggles. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Loving our enemies allows us to accept this invitation and find rest for our souls. By choosing to forgive, we free ourselves from the weight of unforgiveness and allow God's peace to reign in our hearts. Another practical benefit of loving our enemies is the ability to resolve conflicts more effectively. Many people assume that loving your enemies means being passive or allowing others to walk over you. However, this is a misconception. Loving our enemies does not mean we allow harmful behavior to continue unchecked or ignore injustices. Instead, it means approaching the conflict with the goal of reconciliation and peace, rather than retaliation or further division. When we approach conflicts with love, we are better able to listen, empathize, and seek solutions that are mutually beneficial. Rather than allowing anger to cloud our judgment and escalate the situation, love helps us remain calm and focused on resolving the issue at hand. It encourages us to see the humanity in others, even when we disagree or are hurt by them. By approaching conflicts with the goal of understanding rather than winning, we create a space where dialogue and reconciliation can take place. Loving our enemies does not mean avoiding confrontation. It means confronting issues with respect and a willingness to find common ground. By choosing to love, we set aside our pride and open ourselves to the possibility of healing relationships. Matthew 18:15 gives us a framework for resolving conflict. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their faults just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. This approach involves honest communication, but it also requires a heart of love and a desire to restore the relationship, not destroy it. In practical terms, loving our enemies in conflict situations helps us avoid the destructive cycle of retaliation, insult, and escalating anger. Instead, we can engage in productive conversations that lead to mutual understanding, forgiveness, and ultimately peace. This ability to resolve conflicts in a peaceful way is a direct result of choosing love over hatred. When we live by the command to love our enemies, we contribute to building a peaceful community. Peace begins in the heart of each individual, and when we choose to love even those who oppose us, we set a powerful example for others. If every person responded to conflict with love, we would witness a profound transformation in how society handles disagreements and tensions. In the New Testament, Romans 12:18 urges us, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. This command suggests that while we may not always be able to control the actions of others, we can control how we respond. By choosing peace, forgiveness, and love, we become agents of change in our communities. When we love our enemies, we show others that peace is possible even in the most difficult of circumstances. Loving our enemies can help dismantle barriers of division, whether they are racial, cultural, or personal. It promotes understanding and healing, moving us closer to a world where peace is not just an ideal, but a reality. This doesn't mean ignoring differences or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means choosing love as the basis for engagement even with those who may not agree with us. Through this approach, we foster an atmosphere of mutual respect where peace can thrive. As Christians, we are called to be peacemakers just as Jesus was. In Matthew 5:9, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." By living out this teaching, we actively work toward the peaceful community that Jesus envisioned, one built on love, forgiveness, and understanding. Interestingly, loving our enemies has tangible benefits beyond our spiritual well-being. It can also improve our mental and physical health. Studies have shown that holding on to grudges, anger, and resentment can have harmful effects on our health. Chronic stress, anxiety, and depression are often linked to negative emotions like hatred and unforgiveness. These emotions create a constant state of tension and anxiety, leading to physical health problems such as high blood pressure, heart disease, and weakened immune function. On the other hand, forgiveness and love contribute to better physical health. When we forgive and love our enemies, we release the emotional burden that comes with holding on to anger. As a result, we experience lower levels of stress, better sleep, and an overall improvement in our mood and well-being. Research has shown that forgiveness can reduce anxiety, depression, and hostility, while increasing feelings of hope, compassion, and overall happiness. When we let go of hatred, we allow ourselves to heal physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Furthermore, choosing to love our enemies promotes a healthier stress response. Instead of reacting to stress with anger or hostility, we learn to respond with calm and compassion, which helps us manage stressful situations better. This shift in emotional response leads to a reduction in stress-related illnesses, better heart health, and improved immune function. Loving our enemies, then, is not only spiritually enriching, but also physically beneficial. As we consider the benefits of loving our enemies, take a moment to reflect. In a recent situation, did you feel a sense of relief when you forgave someone instead of holding on to resentment? Think back to a time when you were upset or hurt by someone's actions. Did holding on to that anger make things better, or did it create more stress and unhappiness? Forgiving and loving others may not always be easy, but it is always a path to healing and peace. Can you recall a time when you felt a weight lifted off your shoulders after you chose to forgive? This relief is a clear sign of the power of forgiveness and the peace that comes from choosing love over hate. In this section, we've explored the profound benefits that loving our enemies brings into our daily lives. From inner peace and health benefits to more effective conflict resolution and the ability to build a peaceful community, the act of loving our enemies transforms us, our relationships, and our world. By choosing to forgive and love those who have wronged us, we break free from the chains of resentment and allow ourselves to experience the peace that God intended for us. As we grow in love, we contribute to the healing of our hearts and the healing of the world around us. We are reminded that the path to peace begins with each individual decision to love, forgive, and extend grace. May we all continue to strive for peace in our lives and in our communities, knowing that each act of love is a step closer to the world God has called us to build. Loving our enemies is one of the most difficult yet profoundly impactful teachings of the gospel. While it is easy to love those who treat us well, it's a challenge to extend love to those who hurt us, reject us, or act against us. However, Jesus teaches us that true love is not limited to those who love us in return. Instead, love should transcend boundaries even to those who oppose or harm us. In this section, we will explore practical ways to apply the Gospel's teaching of loving our enemies in our everyday lives. It is not a one-time act, but a continuous practice, something we must work on every day to grow and strengthen our faith. The first and perhaps most crucial step in loving our enemies is forgiveness. Jesus teaches us in Matthew 5:44 to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. Forgiveness is not just a gift we give to others, it is a gift we give ourselves. Holding on to anger, bitterness, or resentment only keeps us chained to the past, and it harms us spiritually, mentally, and even physically. Forgiveness begins with a decision to release the negative emotions that bind us. Praying for our enemies is one of the most powerful ways to begin this process. Prayer is not just for their benefit, but for our own healing as well. When we pray for those who have wronged us, we begin to change our hearts. Prayer helps us see the person as God sees them, flawed just like us and in need of His love and grace. Start by praying for those who have hurt you. Ask God to help you forgive them, to soften your heart and to heal the wounds that have been inflicted. Praying for them doesn't mean that we are condoning their actions, but it does mean that we are choosing to let go of the anger and release them to God's justice. It's an act of humility, acknowledging that we are not in control of the situation, but trusting that God can bring healing and justice in His own time and way. In Luke 6:28, Jesus further instructs us, "Bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you." This shows that prayer is not just about releasing anger, but about actively seeking good for those who have wronged us. Praying for our enemies is one of the most radical acts of love we can perform. Forgiveness is a process, not a one-time event. It may be easy to say the words "I forgive you," but forgiveness, especially in the case of deep hurt, often requires time and continuous effort. True forgiveness is not about excusing bad behavior or forgetting the harm done to us. It is about releasing our right to revenge and choosing peace instead of hatred. Forgiveness begins in the heart. It is about changing the way we think about the person who hurt us. We must choose to see them not as our enemy, but as someone in need of grace and mercy just like ourselves. The gospel teaches us that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing others to continue hurting us, but it is a choice to release the hold that anger, resentment, and bitterness have over us. Forgiveness means that we no longer allow the wrongdoing to define our relationship with the person. It is important to understand that forgiveness doesn't happen all at once. It is often a process that takes time, especially when the pain is deep. It's okay if we don't feel ready to forgive right away, but the key is to begin the process, make the decision to forgive in your heart, and pray for the strength to carry it out. In Ephesians 4:32, Paul writes, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you." We are called to forgive not because the person deserves it, but because we too have been forgiven by Christ. When we forgive, we free ourselves from the burden of resentment and we allow God to heal us. Holding on to bitterness and anger only keeps us stuck in the past, while forgiveness opens the door to freedom and peace. Forgiveness is not easy, but it is always worth it. When it comes to loving our enemies and forgiving those who hurt us, Jesus is our ultimate model. His life and ministry were marked by acts of unconditional love and forgiveness, even for those who sought to harm him. Jesus didn't just teach us to love our enemies, he showed us how to do it. Jesus' life was full of instances where he loved and forgave his enemies even when they treated him with hatred and cruelty. In Matthew 27:46, as Jesus hung on the cross, he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Even in his most painful and vulnerable moment, Jesus was still focused on loving those around him. As he hung there, he was offering forgiveness to the very people who were crucifying him. One of the most profound examples of Jesus loving his enemies is in Luke 23:34, when he prayed for his executioners, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Even while enduring excruciating pain, Jesus chose to forgive his enemies. His actions demonstrated that love is not about what others deserve, but about choosing to show grace regardless of the circumstances. By looking to Jesus, we understand that loving our enemies is not only about the act of forgiving, it is about adopting his mindset. Jesus responded to those who hurt him with love, compassion, and grace, even when it was the hardest thing to do. He set the perfect example of how to love our enemies, and as his followers, we are called to do the same. When we struggle to love our enemies, we can look to Jesus for strength and inspiration. He shows us that loving our enemies is a choice, and that it requires deep trust in God's ability to work through us. Jesus didn't only tell us to love, he showed us how it's done in the most difficult of circumstances. When we follow his example, we are reflecting his love to the world around us. Loving our enemies is not always easy, especially when anger or hurt feels overwhelming. Anger is a natural response when we've been wronged, but it can quickly spiral into bitterness and resentment if we don't manage it. Therefore, it is important to have practical tools and techniques that help us reduce anger and focus on forgiveness. Meditation and prayer are powerful tools that help us slow down, reflect, and regain control of our emotions. Taking a moment each day to meditate or pray can help us center ourselves in God's peace and love. When we pray for the strength to forgive, we invite God to soften our hearts and give us the courage to choose love over anger. Meditating on scriptures such as Romans 12:14, "Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse," can remind us of God's heart for forgiveness and peace. When we feel anger rising within us, it's helpful to take a step back and allow ourselves time to process our emotions before responding. Often, reacting in the heat of the moment leads to regret and further harm. Give yourself space to cool down before engaging with the person who has hurt you. During this time, you can reflect on the situation, pray for guidance, and ask God to help you see things from his perspective. This space can prevent rash actions and allow us to approach the situation with love and wisdom. Loving our enemies can feel isolating, and sometimes we need the support of others to help us through difficult situations. Talk to a trusted friend, mentor, or counselor. who can help you process your feelings and offer advice on how to respond with love. Sometimes having someone to talk to can give us a fresh perspective and help us see the situation in a more loving light. Another powerful technique is to visualize forgiveness. Imagine yourself releasing your anger and bitterness, allowing those emotions to flow away like water. Visualize offering forgiveness to the person who has wronged you, letting go of the pain and choosing peace. This visualization can be a powerful exercise in helping your heart align with God's will to forgive. As we reflect on these practical ways to love our enemies, I challenge you to think about one specific action you can take today to begin loving someone you find difficult to forgive. Whether it's offering a prayer for them, choosing to speak kindly to them, or taking a moment to reflect on their humanity, think about how you can take a step toward forgiveness and love today. Remember, loving our enemies is a process, and it starts with one small intentional step. Loving our enemies is not just a theoretical concept, it is a practice that we must cultivate every day. By choosing to forgive, pray for, and love those who have wronged us, we align ourselves with God's will and follow the example of Jesus. Forgiveness may be difficult, but it is always a path to peace, healing, and freedom. As we incorporate these practices into our daily lives, we begin to reflect the love of Christ to the world around us, breaking the cycle of hatred and promoting reconciliation and peace. May we all take the steps necessary to love our enemies and allow God to transform our hearts. As we've explored today, the teaching to love our enemies is one of the most powerful and challenging aspects of the gospel. It's not merely a suggestion or an ideal to strive for, it is a command from Jesus, one that has the potential to transform our lives and the world around us. Loving our enemies is essential because it allows us to break the cycle of hatred, and vengeance reflects Jesus' example of love and forgiveness and offers us a path to peace, reconciliation, and spiritual growth. When we choose to love our enemies, we not only follow the teachings of Jesus, but also experience profound benefits for ourselves and our communities. Loving our enemies frees us from the burden of anger, and resentment helps us resolve conflicts more effectively and contributes to building a more peaceful society. It brings us inner peace and improves our mental and emotional health while fostering relationships based on understanding and compassion. These benefits show us that loving our enemies is not just about the other person, it's about healing and transforming our own hearts. Start today by applying this teaching in your life. You'll find that loving your enemies isn't just a difficult action, it's a path to peace and inner freedom. By choosing forgiveness and love, we free ourselves from the chains of anger and bitterness, and we open the door to healing and reconciliation. Though it may not be easy, it is always worth it. When we practice love, we reflect the very heart of Jesus. I encourage you to take some time to reflect on your own experiences. How can you apply this teaching in your life today? Maybe there's someone in your life who has hurt you, or perhaps you're struggling to forgive someone. Share your stories, challenges, or questions in the comments section below. Let's create a space where we can learn from each other and support one another in this journey of love. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to continue receiving inspiring content. Together, let's live out the teachings of Jesus and transform our lives with love. Thank you for watching.